What if the greatest betrayal of your life became the catalyst for your ultimate triumph? I grew up in a small town nestled between rolling hills and endless fields. The kind of place where everyone knows your name, but dreams rarely stretch beyond the town limits. My mother, a gentle soul with tired eyes, raised me on her own. She worked double shifts at the local diner, her hands always smelling faintly of coffee and bacon grease. Every night, she'd come home exhausted but managed to muster a smile just for me. In school, I was neither remarkable nor memorable. I didn't have the sharp wit of the class clown or the shining talent of the star athlete. My grades were average at best, and I often found myself lost in the sea of students, just another face blending into the background. I watched as my classmates discovered their passions and chased their ambitions, while I wandered through the hallways wondering where I fit in. One afternoon, while walking home, I stumbled upon an old, discarded radio lying near a junkyard fence. Curious, I picked it up and took it home. That evening, I carefully opened it up on our kitchen table, intrigued by the maze of wires and circuits inside. I didn't realize it then, but this small act ignited something within me, a flicker of interest that began to burn brighter each day. I started spending my weekends scouring the junkyard for any broken electronics I could find. TVs, cassette players, and anything with wires became my new fascination. I'd tinker with them for hours, losing track of time as I tried to understand how they worked. My mother noticed but didn't say much, perhaps hoping I'd eventually find my path. As graduation approached, the question of college loomed over me like a storm cloud. Secretly, I dreamed of becoming an engineer or an inventor, someone who could create things that mattered. But with our limited finances and my average grades, the prospect seemed distant, almost impossible. I decided to let go of that dream, convincing myself it was impractical. Instead, I took a job at the local factory, following the well-worn path that many before me had taken. The factory was a massive, noisy place filled with the hum of machines and the scent of oil. Days blended into weeks, and the monotony weighed heavily on me. Yet, every so often, I'd catch myself gazing out of the grimy windows, wondering if this was all life had in store. It was during one of these moments that fate decided to intervene. One lunch break, I noticed an older man sitting alone at a picnic table behind the factory. He was tinkering with a small mechanical device, his weathered hands moving with surprising dexterity. Curiosity got the better of me, and I approached him. "What are you working on?" I asked hesitantly. He looked up, his blue eyes sharp yet kind. "Just an old habit," he replied with a faint smile. "Used to be an engineer before I retired." His name was Mr. Thompson, and over the next few weeks, we began sharing lunch breaks. He spoke of circuits, programming, and the wonders of innovation. Each conversation left me hungry for more, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. One day, he handed me a worn-out textbook on basic programming. "Take it," he said. "Might spark some ideas." That night, I pored over the book until the early hours of the morning. Lines of code danced before my eyes, confusing yet exhilarating. A world of possibilities seemed to unfold with each page I turned. The next day, I thanked Mr. Thompson, a mix of excitement and fear bubbling inside me. "Do you think someone like me could learn this stuff?" I asked. He chuckled softly. "Son, passion and persistence trump talent any day. The question is, are you willing to put in the effort?" I knew then that I couldn't continue down the path I was on. The factory walls felt more confining than ever, and the urge to break free was overwhelming. But doubts lingered. What if I failed? What if everyone was right, and I was just chasing a foolish dream? One evening, as my mother and I sat in our tiny living room, I gathered the courage to tell her my plans. "I want to learn programming and electronics," I began, my voice unsteady. I think it could change things for us." She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she reached out and squeezed my hand. "If it's what you want, then you should go for it," she said softly. Relief washed over me, but I could sense the worry behind her eyes. Not everyone was as supportive. Friends scoffed at the idea, reminding me of my lack of formal education and the risks involved. "Why give up a steady job for something so uncertain?" they questioned. Their doubts echoed my own fears, but a part of me knew that if I didn't try now, I might never get another chance. With renewed determination, I enrolled in free online courses, diving headfirst into the world of coding and advanced electronics. Nights were spent hunched over my second-hand laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating countless lines of code. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when frustration threatened to derail me. But every small breakthrough reignited my resolve. Little did I know, this decision would set me on a path filled with challenges I couldn't yet imagine. The road ahead was uncertain, and obstacles were sure to arise. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of purpose guiding me forward. And as I closed my eyes each night, I couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow would bring. The day I left my small town felt like stepping off the edge of a familiar map into uncharted territory. With a single suitcase and a heart full of equal parts fear and excitement, I boarded the bus to the city. The towering skyscrapers and constant motion of the metropolis were overwhelming. Streets buzzed with life at all hours, and the air was filled with a symphony of car horns, chatter, and the distant hum of possibilities. Finding my footing in this new place wasn't easy. The city moved at a pace I wasn't accustomed to, and there were moments when I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. To make ends meet, I took on odd jobs, delivering packages during the day and stocking shelves at a grocery store overnight. Sleep became a luxury, but I squeezed in time to continue my online courses whenever I could. One afternoon, while scanning job listings at a crowded internet cafe, an ad caught my eye: entry-level IT support needed at TechSphere Solutions. My pulse quickened. TechSphere was a mid-sized tech company known for innovative solutions. This could be the break I needed. I spent hours perfecting my resume and writing a cover letter that highlighted my self-taught skills and passion for technology. To my surprise, I received a call for an interview the very next week. The interview was nerve-wracking, but I spoke earnestly about my journey and eagerness to learn. A few days later, I got the call. I was hired. Walking into TechSphere for my first day felt like entering a new world. The office was sleek and modern, filled with bright minds and cutting-edge technology. I was assigned to the IT support team under the supervision of Daniel, a man who seemed to command the room with his presence. Tall with a confident stride, he greeted me with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome aboard," Daniel said. "I trust you'll catch on quickly, even without a formal degree." His words were friendly enough, but there was an undertone that made me uneasy. As weeks turned into months, I worked hard to prove myself. I resolved every support ticket promptly and volunteered for extra tasks. However, fitting in was more challenging than I anticipated. Many of my colleagues had degrees from prestigious universities and talked about concepts that sometimes went over my head. When I offered suggestions during meetings, they were often met with polite nods but rarely taken seriously. One day, after proposing an idea to streamline our ticketing system, Daniel pulled me aside. "I appreciate your enthusiasm," he began, "but perhaps you should focus on your assigned duties. Leave the big ideas to those with the proper training." His dismissive tone stung, but I swallowed my pride and nodded. Despite the setbacks, I couldn't shake the feeling that I could make a meaningful contribution. I began staying late after work, studying the company's systems in detail. The more I learned, the more I noticed inefficiencies that seemed to slow everyone down. I started sketching out a prototype for an application that could improve internal communications and task management. One evening, as the office emptied and the city lights flickered on outside the windows, I sat hunched over my computer, lost in code. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "Burning the midnight oil, I see." I looked up to see Lisa, a colleague from the software development team. Startled, I replied, "Oh, yeah, just working on something personal." She approached my desk with a curious smile. "Mind if I take a look?" I hesitated, but then turned the screen toward her. As she scanned through the prototype, her eyes widened. "This is impressive," she said genuinely. "Have you shown this to anyone?" I shook my head. I wasn't sure if it was any good. "You should definitely present this to the team," Lisa encouraged. "It could really help us out." Buoyed by her enthusiasm, I gathered the courage to present the prototype at the next team meeting. To my relief, several colleagues saw its potential and offered constructive feedback. For the first time since joining TechSphere, I felt a sense of belonging. Word of the application reached upper management, and a presentation was scheduled. The night before, I could hardly sleep. This was my chance to make a real impact. As I stood outside the conference room the next morning, nerves fluttered in my stomach, but I reminded myself of how far I'd come. The meeting was a blur of faces and questions. I explained how the application worked, demonstrating its features and benefits. The executives exchanged impressed glances, and one remarked, "This could significantly improve our productivity." After the presentation, I was on cloud 9, but the elation was short-lived. Later that afternoon, an email was circulated company-wide, announcing the development of a new internal application. To my shock, the credit was given entirely to Daniel. I confronted him in his office, trying to keep my voice steady. "Daniel, there's been a mistake. The email about the application we presented today, it says you developed it." He looked up from his desk with an expression of feigned innocence. "Oh, that. Well, as your supervisor, it's part of my role to oversee projects like this. Don't worry, your contribution is appreciated." Appreciated? I echoed, anger rising. I created that prototype from scratch. It was my work. Daniel's gaze hardened. "Listen," he said coolly. "Without my guidance, that prototype would have gone nowhere. You're part of a team, and sometimes that means the team leader gets the recognition. That's how it works here." I left his office feeling a mix of disbelief and betrayal. The validation I'd felt hours before was overshadowed by frustration. That evening, as I walked home through the bustling streets, doubts crept in. Was all my effort pointless if someone else could so easily take credit? Yet, amid the turmoil, a quiet resolve began to form. I thought back to Mr. Thompson's words about passion and persistence. Maybe this was just another obstacle to overcome. Perhaps there was a way to turn this setback into an opportunity. As I turned the corner to my apartment building, I caught sight of a flyer on a lamppost. "Tech Innovators Meetup, join us to share ideas and collaborate." An idea sparked, and for the first time since the confrontation with Daniel, a glimmer of hope surfaced. Maybe my journey at TechSphere wasn't the only path forward. But could I find the courage to step off the beaten path once again? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was certain. I wasn't ready to give up just yet. The morning sun filtered through the office windows, casting long shadows across the rows of desks. I walked in with a sense of anticipation. Today was the day our team would unveil the new application to the entire company. My heart thrummed with a mix of nerves and excitement. After months of hard work, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. As employees gathered in the conference hall, I took a seat near the back, scanning the room for familiar faces. Conversations buzzed around me, but I was lost in thoughts of the presentation. Just then, Daniel stepped onto the stage, his posture confident as he greeted everyone. I waited for him to introduce me, to acknowledge the effort we'd put in. But as he launched into the presentation, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Slide after slide, Daniel showcased the application's features I had painstakingly developed. He spoke eloquently about the design process, the challenges overcome, and the innovative solutions implemented. But there was one glaring omission. He never mentioned my name. Confusion turned to disbelief, and then to a quiet fury. My hands clenched into fists beneath the table, as I realized that Daniel was taking full credit for my work. The applause at the end of his presentation felt like salt in a wound. I needed answers. After the meeting, I found Daniel in his office, the door slightly ajar. Taking a deep breath, I knocked lightly and stepped inside. "Daniel, can we talk?" He glanced up from his computer, his expression unreadable. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I closed the door behind me. I noticed that during the presentation, there was no mention of my involvement in developing the application. I was under the impression we were presenting it together. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly. I thought it would be more streamlined if one person presented. Besides, as the team leader, it's my responsibility to represent our projects. I struggled to keep my voice steady. But this was my initiative. I spent months working on it. Don't you think it's fair to acknowledge that? He stood up slowly, the atmosphere in the room shifting. "Listen," he said coldly, "you should be grateful you're even part of this team. With your background, opportunities like this don't come around often. Don't jeopardize your position by overstepping." A knot formed in my throat. "Are you threatening me?" He smirked. I'm simply giving you some advice. Focus on your assigned tasks and let me handle the rest. It's for the best." I left his office feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. The hallway seemed longer than usual as I made my way back to my desk. Questions swirled in my mind. Should I report this? Would anyone even believe me over Daniel, a respected supervisor? That afternoon, as I stared blankly at my computer screen, a soft voice interrupted my thoughts. "Mind if I sit?" I looked up to see Amelia, a senior developer known for her sharp insights and approachable demeanor. "Sure," I replied, forcing a small smile. She pulled up a chair. "I couldn't help but notice you seemed upset after the presentation. Everything okay?" I hesitated but felt a genuine concern in her gaze. "To be honest, not really. Daniel presented the application I've been working on without giving me any credit." Amelia nodded thoughtfully. I had a feeling something was off. The coding style and features didn't match his usual work. A glimmer of hope sparked within me. "You believe me?" "Of course," she said firmly. "Your dedication hasn't gone unnoticed. I've seen you staying late, poring over code. It's clear you're passionate about what you do." Relief washed over me. I don't know what to do. If I confront him, he might retaliate. But I can't just stay silent. Amelia placed a reassuring hand on my desk. "You don't have to face this alone. We can bring this to the executive team together. They value integrity and innovation, and they need to hear your side of the story." A mix of fear and determination swirled inside me. What if it backfired? She met my gaze steadily. "Sometimes doing the right thing comes with risks. But if we stand up for ourselves and each other, we can make a difference." That evening, we prepared for the meeting, gathering documentation and preparing a presentation that highlighted the development process and my contributions. As we worked, a sense of empowerment began to overshadow my doubts. The next day, we stood outside the executive conference room. My palms were sweaty, and my heart pounded against my ribcage. "Ready?" Amelia asked softly. I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. We entered the room, greeted by a panel of executives seated around a polished table. The room was intimidating, but Amelia's supportive presence bolstered my confidence. We began our presentation, walking them through the application's features, the challenges faced, and the innovative solutions implemented. As I spoke, I noticed nods of approval and exchanged glances among the executives. When we concluded, there was a moment of silence before Mr. Thompson, the CEO, not related to the Mr. Thompson from my hometown, stood up. "This is outstanding work," he said warmly. "Your initiative and dedication are exactly what we strive for at TechSphere. Thank you for bringing this to our attention." A wave of relief and pride washed over me. The executives applauded, and for the first time, I felt truly seen and valued. However, the victory was short-lived. Word of our presentation quickly reached Daniel. Later that afternoon, he stormed into my workspace, his face flushed with anger. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed, keeping his voice low but his tone menacing. I stood my ground. "I presented my work to the executives, just as you did." His eyes narrowed. "You're making a big mistake. I can make things very difficult for you here." True to his word, over the next few days, Daniel began fabricating performance issues. Minor mistakes were blown out of proportion, and he lodged formal complaints against me. Meetings with HR became a regular occurrence, each one more frustrating than the last. "We've received concerns about your work," the HR representative said, glancing sympathetically at me. "Given the circumstances, we have to place you under review." It felt like the walls were closing in. Despite my efforts and contributions, Daniel's seniority and influence overshadowed the truth. I was suspended pending investigation, left in a state of limbo. Sitting alone in my apartment that evening, the city lights flickering outside my window, I felt a deep sense of isolation. Had all my hard work been for nothing? The doubts I'd battled before began to resurface. But then, a message popped up on my phone. It was from Amelia. "Don't lose hope. Let's meet tomorrow to discuss our next steps." A flicker of determination ignited within me. Perhaps this was just another hurdle to overcome. The fight wasn't over yet, and I wasn't alone in this battle. As I prepared for what lay ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a turning point, a chance to redefine my path. Little did I know, the choices I made in the coming days would alter the course of my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. The suspension from TechSphere left me in a quiet whirlwind of emotions. My small apartment felt even more confined as I paced the worn carpet, the city's distant hum seeping through the cracked window. Questions swirled endlessly. Had I made a mistake by standing up to Daniel? Was my journey in the tech world over before it truly began? One afternoon, as rain tapped gently against the glass, I sat down with a notebook and began to write. I jotted down everything: the excitement I felt when I first opened that discarded radio, the late nights spent learning code, the exhilaration of creating something new. Somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of why I started this journey. The corporate battles and office politics had overshadowed my true passion: innovation. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I opened the door to find Amelia standing there, a sympathetic smile on her face. "Thought you might need some company," she said, holding up a bag of takeout and 2 steaming cups of coffee. We settled at the small kitchen table, the aroma of food filling the space. "I've been thinking," she began cautiously, "maybe this is an opportunity in disguise." I raised an eyebrow. "An opportunity?" She nodded. "To do something on our own terms. We've both seen how stifling the corporate environment can be. What if we started our own venture?" The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Start our own company? That's a big leap. "Yes, but think about it," Amelia pressed. "We have the skills, the ideas, and the drive. Why not take control of our destinies instead of relying on flawed systems?" I gazed out the window, the city lights blinking like distant stars. The thought of building something from the ground up stirred a long-dormant excitement within me. "But we don't have the resources or the backing," I reasoned. "We may not have much," she admitted, "but we have enough to start. We can focus on creating accessible tech solutions, things that make a real difference in people's lives." A spark ignited. Like applications for small businesses or tools for underserved communities? "Exactly," Amelia smiled. "We can prioritize innovation and integrity over profits and politics." I took a deep breath. Let's do it. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. We pooled our savings, rented a tiny office space above a bookstore, and registered our startup, Nexus Innovations. The name represented our goal to be a central point where ideas and technology intersected for the greater good. Setting up was exhilarating but fraught with challenges. Without formal credentials or significant funding, securing investments was an uphill battle. Potential investors were skeptical of 2 relatively unknown individuals without impressive resumes or degrees. Rejections came swiftly and often. One particularly tough day, after a long string of dismissive meetings, I slumped into my chair, frustration weighing heavily. "Maybe we were too idealistic," I muttered. Amelia placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Every setback is a setup for a comeback," she said gently. "Let's find another way." That evening, we decided to showcase our projects on online platforms. We created demo videos, wrote articles about our vision, and engaged with tech communities on social media. To our surprise, people began to take notice. Messages of encouragement poured in, along with inquiries about our services. Our first client was a local nonprofit struggling to manage their volunteer network. We developed a simple, user-friendly application that streamlined their processes. Their gratitude was overwhelming, and word of mouth spread quickly. Gradually, our client base grew. Small businesses, community organizations, and even schools reached out, impressed by our practical solutions and personalized approach. We hired a few like-minded individuals who shared our passion and values, and our small team became a close-knit family. One morning, as I sipped my coffee and scanned industry news, a headline caught my eye: "TechSphere Solutions faces internal turmoil amidst employee exodus." Intrigued, I read on. Reports detailed how the company was struggling after implementing a flawed version of the application I had originally developed. Without the proper understanding and care, the system was riddled with bugs, causing delays and frustration. Employees were leaving in droves, citing poor management and unethical practices. Whispers of Daniel's misconduct had surfaced, and an internal investigation was underway. It seemed that the very tactics he used against me were now unraveling his own career. A mix of emotions swirled within me: vindication, sadness, but also a sense of closure. Amelia noticed my distant expression. "Penny for your thoughts?" I showed her the article. She read it quietly and then looked up. "How do you feel about it?" I pondered for a moment. I wouldn't wish failure on anyone, but perhaps this is the consequence of choices made without integrity. She nodded thoughtfully. Our experiences there led us to where we are now. Maybe it's all part of the journey. As Nexus Innovations gained momentum, we received recognition from industry publications for our innovative and ethical approach. Invitations to speak at conferences began to arrive, and our story resonated with many who felt disillusioned by traditional corporate structures. One day, we were approached by a major corporation interested in partnering with us to develop technology for underserved communities globally. It was an opportunity beyond anything we had imagined. Sitting in the conference room after the successful meeting, I turned to Amelia. "Can you believe how far we've come?" She smiled warmly. "Yes, because we believed in ourselves and stayed true to our values. As we expanded, we remained committed to our mission. We established partnerships with nonprofits, offering technology solutions that empowered others. Our team grew, but the familial atmosphere persisted, each member aligned with our vision. Amidst the success, I often reflected on the path that led me here, the challenges, the doubts, the unexpected turns. One evening, as the sun set over the city skyline, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, I stood on the balcony of our office. The hum of traffic below was a comforting reminder of the life bustling all around. A thought lingered in my mind. Had I not faced those hardships at TechSphere, would I have found the courage to venture out on my own? Perhaps adversity was the catalyst that propelled me toward my true purpose. Just then, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Curiosity piqued. I opened it to find a brief note. "Congratulations on your success. I regret how things ended between us. Daniel." I stared at the message, a flurry of emotions stirring. Part of me wanted to respond, to seek closure or perhaps offer forgiveness. But another part realized that I'd moved beyond the need for validation from those who doubted me. I locked the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. The future was wide open, filled with possibilities yet to be explored. Turning back toward the warm glow of the office, where laughter and the clatter of keyboards mingled, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had risen against the odds, not by stepping on others, but by lifting each other up. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its own challenges, but we were ready to face them together. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, I made a silent promise to myself to continue forging a path defined by integrity, compassion, and relentless pursuit of innovation. After all, the journey was just beginning, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead next. The sun peeked through the blinds of our modest office, casting golden stripes across the floor. I sat at my desk, sipping my morning coffee, when Amelia burst through the door, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "You'll never guess who just called," she exclaimed, barely containing her enthusiasm. I looked up, curiosity piqued. "Who?" "Global Tech Enterprises. They want us to develop a custom solution for their new initiative," she said, waving a printed email. "This could be huge for us." My heart skipped a beat. Global Tech was a giant in the industry, and partnering with them could catapult Nexus Innovations into a whole new realm. "Are you serious?" I asked, scanning the email myself. There it was in black and white, a direct invitation to collaborate. Amelia grinned. "They said they've been following our work and are impressed by our approach." For a moment, I was speechless. Just a year ago, we were struggling to find our footing, and now doors were opening that we'd only dreamed of. But with the excitement came a flicker of doubt. "Do you think we're ready for this?" I asked quietly. She placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We've come this far by staying true to our values. If anyone can do this, it's us." We spent the next few weeks immersed in planning meetings and project outlines. Our team expanded, bringing in fresh talent who shared our vision. The office buzzed with energy, each person contributing their unique skills to the monumental task ahead. One afternoon, as I was finalizing some documents, I received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "Request to connect Daniel Roberts." My chest tightened. I hadn't heard from Daniel since his brief message months ago. I hesitated before opening it. The email was brief. Asterisk, I've been reflecting on the past and wanted to apologize for how things ended between us. I admire what you've accomplished with Nexus Innovations. If possible, I'd like to meet and discuss opportunities to work together. Asterisk. A whirlwind of emotions swept through me. Surprise, skepticism, a hint of old resentment. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part recognized this as a chance to close a chapter that had long weighed on me. That evening, I discussed it with Amelia. Do you think I should meet with him? I asked. She considered it for a moment. It could provide closure, but remember to protect what we've built. Proceed with caution. I agreed to meet Daniel at a cafe downtown. As I approached the table, I barely recognized him. The once confident and imposing figure now seemed humbled, his eyes avoiding direct contact. Thank you for meeting me, he began, fidgeting with his coffee cup. I owe you an apology. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. I was threatened by your talent and handled things terribly. It's cost me more than you know, he admitted, his voice strained. I was hoping we could put the past behind us. I'm looking for a fresh start, and thought maybe there was a place for me at Nexus. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. I appreciate your apology and I accept it, but trust is something that has to be rebuilt over time. Nexus is more than just a company. It's a community built on respect and integrity. He looked down, a shadow of disappointment crossing his face. I understand. I wish you the best, Daniel, I said sincerely. Perhaps this is an opportunity for you to find your own path forward. As I left the cafe, I felt a sense of relief. Letting go of past grievances lifted a weight from my shoulders, but I knew that protecting the positive environment at Nexus was paramount. Compassion didn't mean compromising our hard-earned values. Weeks later, a documentary crew reached out, interested in featuring our story in a series about self-made innovators. Standing in front of the camera, I felt a mix of nerves and gratitude. They asked about my journey, the challenges faced, and the lessons learned. What's the most important message you'd like to share with others who feel overlooked or underestimated? The interviewer asked. I paused before answering. That your background doesn't define your future. Passion, persistence, and integrity can open doors you never imagined. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't achieve your dreams. The documentary aired nationwide, and the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people inspired by our story, students, aspiring entrepreneurs, individuals who felt seen and motivated to pursue their own ambitions despite obstacles. One message stood out. It was from a young woman named Sophia, who wrote, Asterisk, I've always loved technology but was told I wouldn't succeed without a formal education. After seeing your story, I've enrolled in coding classes and feel hopeful for the first time. Thank you. Asterisk. Reading her words brought tears to my eyes. Amelia leaned over my shoulder, smiling as she read the message. This is why we do what we do, she said softly. Together, we decided to expand our impact by offering internships and training programs specifically for those without traditional educational backgrounds. We reached out to communities often overlooked by the tech industry, aiming to break down barriers and create opportunities. Nexus Innovations continued to flourish. We secured patents for groundbreaking technologies and received awards for our ethical practices. Our team was a mosaic of diverse talents and stories, each person contributing to a culture of innovation and mutual support. To give back, we established the Nexus Foundation, dedicated to providing resources and education in underprivileged areas. Standing at the ribbon-cutting ceremony of our first community tech center, I felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. As the crowd dispersed, Amelia handed me a small box. What's this? I asked, surprised. Just open it, she urged, her eyes gleaming. Inside was a plaque that read, In recognition of visionary leadership and unwavering dedication to making the world a better place. I looked at her, touched. This means more to me than you know. She smiled. You've inspired all of us. It's only fitting we acknowledge that. That evening, we hosted a celebration at the office. Laughter and music filled the air as our team reflected on the journey we'd shared. Standing amidst the warmth of our Nexus family, I realized how much we'd grown, not just as a company, but as individuals connected by a shared purpose. As the night wound down, I stepped outside onto the balcony. The city stretched out before me, lights twinkling like a sea of stars. Amelia joined me, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. "I'm just thinking about how unpredictable life is," I replied. If someone had told me a few years ago that we'd be here, I wouldn't have believed them. She nodded thoughtfully. "Funny how the toughest climbs lead to the best views." I smiled. Couldn't have said it better myself. A comfortable silence settled between us. The future was as vast and open as the night sky above. Challenges would come, but we were no longer the same people who had started this journey. We were stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. "Here's to the next chapter," Amelia said, raising an imaginary glass. "To the next chapter," I echoed, feeling a profound sense of peace. In that moment, I knew that triumph wasn't just about personal success. It was about transformation, about using our experiences to lift others up and create lasting change. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, I felt certain that our story was only just beginning. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the city skyline as I stood on the rooftop of the Nexus building. The gentle breeze carried the distant sounds of a bustling world below, a world that now felt both vast and intimately connected to my journey. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and let memories wash over me. It had been 2 years since that pivotal night when Amelia and I toasted to the next chapter. Nexus Innovations had grown beyond our wildest dreams, but amid the success, I felt a pull, a quiet yearning to reconnect with where it all began. One weekend, I decided to visit my hometown. The familiar sights greeted me like old friends. The rusted swing set in the park, the corner store where I'd buy candy as a kid, and the narrow streets where I'd spent countless hours lost in thought. As I walked past the diner where my mother used to work, I felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with gratitude. I hadn't told her I was coming. Approaching the small house where I grew up, I noticed the garden was blooming with her favorite flowers, lilies and daisies. I knocked on the door, and after a moment, it swung open. "Mom," I said softly. Her eyes widened in surprise before filling with tears. "Oh, honey, what a wonderful surprise." She pulled me into a tight embrace, the kind that made all the years apart melt away. We spent the afternoon catching up over homemade lemonade. She listened intently as I shared stories of Nexus, the challenges we'd overcome, and the impact we were making. Her gaze never left my face, a mix of pride and awe shining in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've become the person I always knew you could be." "Your support meant everything to me," I replied. "Even when I wasn't sure of myself, you believed in me." She smiled softly. "That's what mothers are for." As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the quiet street, I felt a profound sense of peace. Being home reminded me of the roots that had anchored me, even when I felt adrift. Before leaving town, I visited the old junkyard where my fascination with electronics had first ignited. Walking among the piles of discarded items, I spotted a familiar shape, a broken radio, much like the one I'd found years ago. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It was a reminder of how something overlooked could hold untapped potential, much like people. Back in the city, I returned to work with renewed vigor. Amelia and I discussed expanding our reach even further, exploring new technologies that could make a positive difference. We delved into renewable energy solutions, artificial intelligence for accessibility, and programs to support education in remote areas. One evening, as we brainstormed ideas, Amelia looked at me thoughtfully. "Have you ever considered writing about your journey?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean like a memoir?" "Exactly," she said. "Your story could inspire so many more people if it reached a wider audience." The idea intrigued me. If sharing my experiences could help others overcome their own obstacles, it was worth considering. Over the next few months, I began penning down memories, lessons learned, and reflections on resilience. Meanwhile, we started hosting workshops and seminars, inviting people from all walks of life to learn about technology and innovation. Seeing their eyes light up with possibility reminded me of my own early sparks of curiosity. At one seminar, a young man approached me afterward. "I never thought someone without a fancy degree could make it in this field," he confessed. "But hearing your story gives me hope." I smiled. "Your background doesn't define your potential. Passion and perseverance can take you places you never imagined. He nodded, a newfound determination in his eyes. Moments like these reinforced the importance of our mission, not just to innovate, but to empower others to realize their own capabilities. As Nexus continued to thrive, we remained mindful of balancing work with personal well-being. I took up painting as a hobby, finding solace in the strokes of color on canvas. Amelia pursued photography, capturing the world through her unique lens. We encouraged our team to nurture their passions outside of work, fostering a culture that valued holistic growth. One day, an unexpected opportunity arose. A global summit on technology and human advancement invited me to speak as a keynote presenter. Standing on that grand stage, facing an audience of thousands, I felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. I shared not just the successes but the setbacks, the times when doubt threatened to overshadow hope. Every setback is a setup for a comeback, I told them. Embrace the challenges, for they shape you into who you're meant to be. The applause was thunderous, but what moved me most were the conversations that followed. People from diverse backgrounds shared their own stories of struggle and aspiration. It was a testament to the power of vulnerability and connection. Back at Nexus, we initiated programs to encourage empathy and support within the tech industry. We hosted panels on mental health, diversity, and inclusive innovation. Our belief was simple: when diverse voices are heard, true innovation thrives. One evening, after everyone had left the office, I found myself drawn to the rooftop once more. The city stretched out before me, a tapestry of lights and life. Amelia joined me, 2 cups of tea in hand. "Do you ever think about where we'd be if things had gone differently?" she asked. "All the time," I admitted. "But I believe every step, even the missteps, led us here." She nodded thoughtfully. "It's been quite a journey." "Indeed," I agreed. "And I have a feeling it's far from over." We stood in comfortable silence, the weight of the past balanced by the promise of the future. I felt a deep connection not just to my own path but to a larger mission, to make a meaningful impact on the world. As I gazed at the stars beginning to dot the night sky, a sense of gratitude washed over me. The obstacles, the betrayals, the unexpected allies, they had all been part of a greater tapestry, weaving together to bring me to this moment. Turning to Amelia, I raised my cup. "To resilience," I said. "To purpose," she added, clinking her cup gently against mine. As we sipped our tea, I knew that while the road had been arduous, every twist and turn had been necessary. I was exactly where I was meant to be, and the future beckoned with endless possibilities. Walking back inside, I felt a renewed sense of determination. There were more challenges to face, more innovations to create, and more lives to touch. And I was ready for all of it. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey of perseverance and triumph. If this story moved you or sparked a newfound determination within, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with friends and family who might need a reminder that obstacles can become opportunities. And don't forget to subscribe to Life Narratives for more inspiring stories that empower and uplift. Together, let's continue to embrace resilience and write our own narratives of success.